Welcome to Policing TV. I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by Michael Outram, who is the Commissioner of the Australian Border Force. Michael, thank you so much for joining us here at Milipol in Singapore.
It's really my pleasure.
On Policing TV. First of all, the reason you're here, tell us, Australian Border Force at Milipol in Singapore, what brought you to Milipol?
Well, firstly, our relationship with Singapore. Our countries are so close. Our Prime Minister's just recently signed up to the second Strategic Comprehensive Partnership, and the border is a pillar in that. So I work very closely with Singapore Customs, the Immigration Checkpoints Authority, Home Team Academy, and HTX, the Home Team Technology Department. And we have a relationship with each of those. So I come to Singapore a lot, and we have MOUs, we do work, we do joint operations, and we collaborate on technology, workforce, those sorts of projects.
So HTX, you mentioned in that, the Home Team Exchange, I think it stands for, Technology Exchange, I beg your pardon.
It's their technology department,
and the bringing together of quite a number of different departments from within Singapore to strengthen their response to some of the challenges that there are. What have you seen of HTX and what do you think of it?
Well, they're 5 years old, and here they are partnering up with Milipol, and this is my first time here, this amazing event, and they are actually leading the way in our region. So I think the way they bring together all of their technology experts, their data sciences across the Home Team, group of agencies is quite remarkable, and what they've done in 5 years is more remarkable. So we see the technologies they're developing in Singapore. It's a small country with a massive airport. They're about to, bring on Terminal 5 or build Terminal 5 at Changi. I'm told it's going to be bigger than the other four put together. And they're building a megaport project. So volumes of trade, volumes of travellers coming through this part of the world are going to go north exponentially, and they're having to use technology to make sure that the risk doesn't go up, because they just don't have the people to grow in those organisations. So it's a really interesting sort of microcosm, I guess, of innovation and technology and trials and errors and ideas and thoughts and collaboration. I'd say is the main thing. The Singaporeans are great collaborators, both within their system but also internationally.
And a great deal of material, I suspect, that would be of fascination to other policing jurisdictions worldwide.
Absolutely.
Including on, you mentioned there, the limited number of staff that they have and the need for technology. Absolutely. To support the staff that they do have. Well, that's a challenge worldwide as well. It just with policing looking to recruit the very best people and then provide those people with the right technological support. So quite some challenge there.
It's a huge challenge, but I think with Singapore, they obviously have a smaller scale than a lot of bigger countries, and I think they can do things a lot more quickly. They complain themselves about bureaucracy and not quick enough. I'd say I'd take their world any day, but they do drive innovation rapidly, and the way they partner with industry, the way that they bring industry in to help them solve technological problems rather than doing it all in-house, I think is a really good model for us to look at.
Now, you have an absolutely fascinating background. You started in policing with the Metropolitan Police Service in London in the United Kingdom. You moved to Australia, where you now find yourself as the Commissioner of the Australian Border Force, having had a prior career at the Australian Federal Police and elsewhere. So this part of the conversation could take quite some time, but I'm just intrigued as, first of all, to what you remember of the differences between Northern Hemisphere and Southern Hemisphere in moving from the Met to then AFP and now to the Australian Border Force.
Yeah, so I walked in the gates at Hendon in September 1980, so a little while ago now, and did 20 years in the Met as a detective working on the anti-terrorist branch. But towards the end of the 90s, I got involved in the sort of anti-corruption space, and the Met sent me to Australia to look at what they'd learned out of the Woodrow Commission in New South Wales Police. So I went to Australia for 8 months, came back to the Met and got a phone call from the Independent Commission Against Corruption in Australia, offered me a job. And so me and my wife thought, we'll go back in a couple of years, and here we are, sort of 20 odd years later.
So you got poached.
I got poached and then poached again by a federal intelligence agency called the Australian Crime Commission, then now the Criminal Intelligence Commission, looking at organised crime, joint investigations task forces and those things. From there, I then went to the Australian Federal Police, took on a role as an Assistant Commissioner, and then from there to Customs. Customs became Border Force, and eventually I became its Commissioner. So that's kind of the journey. And in terms of it was really interesting when I first moved to Australia. I kind of thought it was just like Britain initially, but then after a few months, you start to realise it's different. The laws are similar. Policing cultures are actually quite similar. I think there's a lot of compatibility and interoperability between Australian and British law enforcement and the US for that matter. Of course, we've got the Five Eyes partnerships, and that includes in the border space and the policing space. But Australia's a federal system. That's the first thing that becomes really different. So the pandemic brought that home to me as the Border Force Commissioner. The states and territories become fiercely independent at times, and that created us some legislative and operational challenges. But the biggest difference is Australia is not in Europe, it's in Asia, the Asia Pacific. And our relationships with the Pacific Island nations, with Papua New Guinea, with Indonesia, with Singapore, with these countries is absolutely vital to Australia's economic security and national security. So a lot of my work is very much focused on our part of the world. And that's a really different culturally than working with the Europeans, working with the US and the Canadians in the Northern Hemisphere. It's a really different cultural environment, and I think it requires a slightly different sort of approach. And we've got to be, in Australia's sort of sense, we've got to be very sensitive and conscious of what's happening in our region, and to work regionally wherever we can, rather than autonomously. That's the main difference.
So tell us something more about the Border Force's responsibilities. I imagine, first of all, that your border is the Australian border rather than state borders, plural.
Yes.
And then, I know from my research that you have staff who are in ports. You also have a significant dog team, but you also have you have a marine resource, so it's actually quite wide-ranging.
I'll make it simplify for your policing audience. We're kind of the Coast Guard, Customs Service, and Immigration Enforcement rolled into one. So we have,
and indeed you were rolled into one some 6 or 8 years ago.
In 2015, and that's been an interesting and at times challenging journey to bring that organisation together. But I think we've done that pretty well now. But our responsibilities, think about it: 33,000 kilometres of coastline, 10.2 million square kilometres of exclusive economic zone at sea. So the threats to Australia in a national security sense, which includes, we work very closely with the police. Narcotic smuggling obviously is a big issue for Australia. People smuggling is another big issue. Illegal fishing, all these things are things that challenge our country. Illegal migration. So we very much work hand in glove with the police. But our responsibilities are far and wide. And think about immigration. We run detention centres, for example, in Australia, and so we have a big involvement in Operation Sovereign Borders, which I know is of interest to UK authorities, how we manage that. So some days my job is brilliant, I love it, but not every day is a good day. So we do some really difficult, some of the policies, particularly you get this in the UK, implementing policy around migration law is challenging because it's politically contentious. Therefore, the margins for error for our people operationally are virtually zero, because everything's on the spotlight that we do. And so I've got to say that that's a challenging part of the Border Force's remit, whereas in the customs world, intercepting narcotics, working with the police, collecting duty and revenue and all those things is not quite so challenging at times. And
you're doing this with a staff of some, I think, 6,000 officers or thereabouts.
Yeah.
So it's not, it's not the smallest organisation ever, but it's not the largest either.
No, about the same size as Dutch Customs. And their coastline's not 33,000 kilometres long, I can tell you.
I feel you've used that comparison one or two times before.
So exactly. So therefore, targeting, intelligence, and now what we're here for in Milipol TechX, to talk about AI and data and how we can, with far more precision, look at the vulnerabilities around our border, because I'm not going to get thousands more officers. Our budget just won't allow it. It's probably the same in the UK. So we've got to look at technology and data and different ways of managing the risk, because volumes of passengers, volumes of goods, these things are going to continue to go north, which is great for our economy. But with that comes risk, and so we're working through with partners how we manage that risk.
So, heading towards the close of this conversation, we could go on for some very considerable time. But I'd like us to come to a close by your looking at the future, the challenges. You mentioned AI there, for example. Do you see that as one of the major opportunities or challenges in the policing and the border world?
I think it's both. I think firstly, I look at AI through the lens of firstly people. Are our people ready for it? Do they have the confidence that they don't lose their jobs as a result of using it? And how can we best use it? And so how do we equip our workforce, and how do we bring the data scientists to work with our operators so we get the best out of it? The second one is trust. AI requires a lot of data, and a lot of that data is about people. You've got privacy, you've got all those issues. We've got to build governance and good systems and transparency so that people trust us to collect their biometrics, trust us to collect all of that information that allows the 99.9% of our people to get on with their daily life, and allows us to hone in on those that we should be worried about. And then finally, the power of this thing. This AI is potentially exponentially powerful for us in identifying risk, but also for the bad people to attack our systems, to attack our infrastructure, to attack the border. To try and bring the border to a close. So you've got to look at AI through a sort of multifaceted sort of lens, and we're still trying to grapple with what does this thing mean. But we're working with AI now. We're using AI now in the Australian Border Force. We're using machine learning. We're using it to pore over new data sets we've never seen before, working with industry, so that we can actually target criminals and criminal activity with far more precision.
Now, AI isn't the only threat or opportunity in the future of these matters. Are there areas that you see as representing a threat or opportunity?
Yeah, threat-wise, recently a friend of my son's was doing a project at school, year 12, and asked me about Operation Sovereign Borders, which is about illegal migration, irregular migration, call it what you will. And I said to him, unfortunately, this is going to be a problem for the rest of your life and your grandchildren's life. Because if you look at the world around climate change, conflict, the dials are all going the wrong way, and that means there's a lot of displacement in Western democracies in particular. I think we're attractive, obviously, as destination countries, and it's a pernicious challenge because politically it's fraught. So I think that's a massive challenge politically and operationally for border agencies like mine. And narcotics, the international supply chain has been infiltrated by transnational serious organised crime. Where it's at sea, in the airports, around, not just around Australia. And so we are doing a lot of work in the Border Force internationally to try and come to terms with how we try and, iron out some of the wrinkles and the risks in the international supply chain, that criminal infiltration that's taking place. There's just two. I could go on.
Well, I won't invite you on this occasion to go on. I would love the opportunity at some point in the future. But Michael Outram, Commissioner of the Australian Border Force, for the time being, thank you so much.
It's been my pleasure.